Okay, now it's 32. So I welcome you to our webinar concerning gender equality in urban forestry, if it is a reality or utopia. So I have invited a panel of people who are working in this field or have experience in this field. First of all, we invited Adrina Bardekjian. She is from Canada. She is an urban forester or an urban forestry researcher, writer, and educator, and has contributed to urban forestry for over 15 years. And her research focuses on the social aspects of agriculture in urban forestry, including identity and labor and women's leadership. She has a number of publications, is the recipient of several awards, and she has produced short films to share her work, including a Woman Branching Out. Dr. Bardekjian is the Director of Engagement and Research with Tree Canada and an adjunct professor with forestry at the University of Toronto. We also have invited Rick de Vreese. He lives currently in Belgium and leads the urban forestry team at the European Forest Institute in Bonn, where he coordinates the Horizon 2020 project Clearing House, which looks at urban forests as a nature-based solution. He has a master in applied biological science with a major in forestry from the Ghent University and a PhD in human ecology. He is also a visiting professor in landscape ecology at Ghent University and member of the international steering group at the European Forum on Urban Forestry. We have invited also Dr. Clémence Dirac. She is a biologist, married with 3 children. She did her PhD thesis in Madagascar, studying how farmers are using forest soils, products, and services with the aim to propose socio-economical recommendations to decrease pressure on forests. After working 4 years at the Swiss National Science Foundation, she began to work in 2015 at the Federal Office for the Environment in Switzerland. Among others, she, as her thematic focus is on urban forestry and recreation in forests. And since 2018, she is conducting their section Forest Ecosystem Services and Silviculture at the Federal Office for the Environment. And she's sharing this job together with Christophe Dürr. The last panelist that we have invited is Yves Cassimy. He's 53 years old, so maybe that's an important thing to mention, and holds a master in forestry and a master in public administration. He is the head of the Regional Forest District of Lausanne in Switzerland, and he oversees the management of 4,000 hectares of urban and peri-urban forests. Over his career, he has specialized in social aspects of forestry and especially public participation in forestry decision making. So as you can see, we have different people coming from different regions of this world, but also bringing different qualities in the research topic. So why we are doing this, this webinar, maybe shortly to myself. So I'm Jerylee Wilkes-Allemann. I'm working at the Applied School of Science in Switzerland, in Bern. And I'm mainly concentrate my research on urban forestry, communication, and also recreation. So why are we doing this webinar? And one important thing that inspires us, because behind me, there is a couple of women that also participated in developing this webinar and brainstorming what we should do. And at the end of this presentation, I will show the names of all the women that have been involved so far. So this paper published by Adrina Bardekjian, who is also as a panelist here, as I already said, analyzing women in urban forestry and arboriculture experiences and barriers and strategies for leadership inspired us strongly to develop this webinar and to see how it is the situation in Switzerland, but also how it is in other countries. And why Switzerland, I will tell the reason later. So in this paper, if you don't know it already, they have sent a questionnaire to around 500 women working in the field of urban forestry, arboriculture, and related fields in Canada and Northern America. If I forget some important information, Adrina, please, you can expand on that. So in this article, they found out that 68% of the respondents felt that the barriers they face are due to their gender. The main barriers mentioned included discrimination, family responsibilities, promotion bias, and gender pay gaps. Additionally, the majority of participants reported that women and men are not treated equally in their industry, that they have experienced or witnessed sexist behavior or sexual harassment in their industry, and that women in the industry face a set of challenges and barriers that are different from those faced by men. So this one of the reasons why we said, okay, we need to see the situation. But also in Switzerland, there was a study in 2001 studying the gender equality and career opportunities for women in forestry. So urban forestry was not a topic by that time. So in 2001, the same institution where Clémence Dirac is working, they did this analysis. And here in the graph, you can see the amount of women studying forestry at the ETH, at the Technical University. So that you can see that between 1970 and 1995, it has increased slightly. And the situation in 2001 was, of course, different as it is now. By that time, women constituted less than 2% of the workforce, being somewhat better represented at higher levels of qualification. Those women opting for a career in forestry were more likely to be forestry engineers than forest wardens or forest rangers. In this study, they investigated the causes of the underrepresentation of women, and they set some measures on how the situation could be improved for women in the forestry sector in Switzerland. The situation today, as we can see from this graph, this is the latest numbers I have from the Technical University, where you can see the amount of women and men studying forest, also doing a master environmental science with a specialization in forestry and landscape management, forest and landscape management. So as you can see, the amount of women studying or doing this master thesis has slightly improved, or there are some years, for example, here in 2020, where the amount of women is higher than the amount of men. Sorry, the blue is the woman. I couldn't see because the pictures were in front. So I wanted to say 2050, for example, or 2030, the amount of women is higher than the amount of men. So we can see that the situation has improved at the university level. That the number of women studying forestry has increased. However, the number of women in a leadership position, if we can see, this is another study which was run by an organization called Fachfrauen Umwelt, which is which is women working in the environmental domain. And they have run did a study to see how is the situation in different fields for women working in a leadership position. And if we look at the rates for this is for the university level, and this is for the level at the applied school. So we can see that the amount of women has, so it's 52%, for example, for the university level, which are in the leadership position, and for people studying in the applied science is 37%. So it has improved somehow. So this is not. This is just as they just choose. They have just a pool of 1,000 members, and there were like these people who are already highly qualified, who were taken into consideration. But the reality is like in general, the situation of women in a leadership position hasn't really improved as we would like. So there are more women working in a leadership position, but it could still be improved. And for example, if we look at the numbers of women being in a professorship, we really have to count on a hand how many women are in such a professorship, at least in the forestry domain. So my personal inspiration to take the lead in this webinar is that I'm currently working on a project proposal to see how has the situation in Switzerland developed from 2001 until today. So we want to see if the measures have had an effect or not, and to see where we can improve the situation in the urban forestry sector and forestry sector for women. And as you all know, like for example, there was a couple of weeks ago, there were in the newspaper about that all the research, for example, in medicine has been led and so has integrated just men in their analysis. So all the things, or for example, in the cars, etc., they just consider the weights of the middleman, etc., but not of a woman. So today's program is, we are having a short introduction into the topic, and then we will work into three different blocks. In the first block, we will discuss what is the gender situation in our current working environment, where I will integrate the participants and also the panelists. Then we will have, we will present you a statement to see how, if you agree or disagree with this statement, and also we will discuss it also with the participants. And at the end, I would like to have a round of discussion with the panelists on what are the next steps on how we could improve the situation for women. So here is the list of people who are behind this set of planning this webinar. So we are different women working in different fields, and the idea is that we develop together a project that could be comparing different countries, what is the situation in Europe, but also maybe develop a cost action so that we can share together our work and our ideas. So that was the short introduction I wanted to give you. I want to thank these great panelists that are here today. And I would like to start with the first poll that I will send to everybody. And after the participants have put their answers, then we can discuss it together with you. No, sorry, this is the wrong poll. I have. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, what kind of working environment are you working in? So the panelists can also put their answer, and then we will discuss it. So I will wait a little bit. Just there are some people missing. So at least 5 people more could, or 4 could more, I'm waiting for 4 more responses.
So Jerylee, we just need to click right on the line.
Yes, you can. I think as a co-host you can do it. I don't notice. As a co-host you are not able to respond. So just
that's why. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Rick. That's I realize it now. So this is the answer. Can you see it? Can you see the results?
Yes.
So the results say that 78% of the participants, so 7 participants that are today with us, work in an environment with more men. Just 1 stated that it's balanced and 1 stated that it's more women. So my question to the panelists would be, how do you see it? how is it in your working situation? And I would like to start with Rick.
Thank you, Jerylee. I admit I would have to do the counting. I think it's quite balanced at the moment at EFI, the European Forest Institute. In our Bonn office, we have two head of programs, one male, one female, so that's nicely balanced. But I think definitely when it comes to senior researchers, there is unfortunately an imbalance. And I don't have to probably not to say which direction the imbalance is going, but at the general level, I think we are well balanced, or maybe even have a little bit more female persons in the team. Maybe when I'm a bit looking back at my career or all organizations where I have been working, I definitely also see this shift with more and more women coming into the field. Although, yeah, the getting a bit higher in higher positions is maybe still more difficult. Although I've been working with people who have who you call this a medium senior level, where the teams have also been very balanced. So yeah. Things are changing, probably. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrina, what do you think?
Thanks, Jerylee. I mean, in my work environment, so I work for a national NGO here in Canada called Tree Canada, where we work to plant trees and across communities across the country. We work in engagement and research. And so we have a staff currently of 16 core staff, and I believe 3 are men. So it's mostly women, I would say, in the head office, which is based in Ottawa. I'm based out of Toronto, so I work remotely most of the time. But if you look at our board of directors, for example, we have 15 board members, and I believe 5 are women. So I think it's I don't know if that balances out, but it's hard to say. But I think overall, when I look at the urban forest landscape, especially considering the results of our research, I do think it's been traditionally a male-dominated field, and that was the impetus for us to even do that research, was to look at women's experiences and how it's changed over time. Mm-hmm. But for my personal work environment, yes, it's mostly women in our Tree Canada office.
Thank you, Adrina. Yves.
Well, to make it precise, I should differentiate between, if I look at all the colleagues working really in the field, forest workers, we definitely have far more men. I can just count, to my knowledge, 5 women working in my canton as forest worker out of more than 150 men. When it comes to regional forest service, so the regional forest service I'm heading, we have 14 men and 1 woman. So once more, quite unbalanced. When it comes to our headquarters, then we have definitely more women than men. And when it comes to the management, to our directory staff, then definitely we have far more men than women. That's the kind of thing we can see where the balance is and where the imbalances are.
Thank you, Yves. Clémence, how is in your field?
So if we speak about the forest division of the federal office, I think it's very well balanced. So it changed a lot the last 5 years, but now we have a very well representative division for the minorities. In Switzerland, gender is one issue, and of course we have the language issue, and French people, Italian, they are very well represented in the forest division, as well as women. I think it's kind of 50-50 something like this. So it's very well done. even in the direction of the division. We are 3 men and 2 women, and it's well balanced actually. If we speak about the direction of the federal office, or in the position of responsibility, so really at the top we have only 1 man and 4 women now at the direction, so it's very woman. But in between, the division head, the section head, here you have very less women actually, and very much more man. But in the collaborator level, then you have also 50-50.
Okay. Thank you. So it's very interesting to see how it is, how also participants feel it is. And I wanted to pose a question. How has it changed over the last 10 years? What is your experience? I open the floor so each one who feels comfortable answering this question could just go for it.
I can start, Jerylee.
Okay, go ahead,
that's great.
Sure. So I think I would say that in Canada and in urban forestry, over the last 10 years, there have been certainly more women entering the field of urban forestry and arboriculture, to be sure. And what we found in our research was it really also depended on where, and I think Yves sort of alluded to this earlier, but where you are in what aspect of the field that you're in. So certainly in operations, in tree climbing and tree maintenance, and sort of the on the ground level of work, it's still quite male dominated, even though we are seeing more women enter those aspects of urban forestry. But when you look at education and stewardship and even in some cases the management level, there's certainly a balance, if not more women over the last 10 years. So I think you can take the industry overall, but you would also look at that in terms of the different areas and the different types of jobs and positions that people are aspiring to have in those industries. But overall, I would say, yes, there's definitely been an increase of women in urban forestry and arboriculture in Canada.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, this question, because once more, if I look at the difference, different level that I was referring to, the one which really increased a lot is what I would call, it's all the people in our headquarters. They have a very transversal and services approach. They really, enable us in the field to work. And this is where basically we have almost switched from very few, almost at a time now, no women, to more than half of the manager as being a woman. For the rest, it's quite stable. And the funny thing is that I was asking myself why, and at least I have no answer to that. But that's interesting is our field position is it's far more conflictual, and because I couldn't say that to myself, so I asked all my colleagues women what they were thinking, and how does it come that, for example, we have 15 regional director and only 1 woman. And one point that came repeatedly was that it's a tough job because it's quite conflictual. So at least it appears that it had somehow an effect on whether the interest or the access to this position. I have no answer to that.
Did you find something similar in your research, Adrina? Or some clues why this could be an issue?
So I think in general, I just want to say one thing before I get to that. It's interesting because the discussions that I've been having lately have really brought up this idea of cross-cultural, like how different women also experience discrimination or let's say obstacles to entering certain fields and things like that, because we all come from different places and there's expectations on different scales, whether you look at family units and what that might present itself. And I always say this, I mean, I'm Armenian, that's my background. Even though I was born and raised in Canada, I mean, going into environmental conservation was not the preferred choice for my parents as a career. I mean, they're happy now, I suppose, but it wasn't really an option. So I think that plays into this discussion quite a bit in terms of increase in women over time, but it's also looking at those different options available and barriers too, as it were, in some cases. And I know we'll get to that sort of later in our conversation, but I did want to raise that since we're talking about it. That's not something that I studied in this particular study, but it's definitely come up in our conversations over the last couple of years on various international panels.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adrina. Do you want to say your experience, Rick or Clémence?
So maybe when I begin, because I began 5 years ago at the Federal Office for the Environment, and I really saw a change, a very, very big change in 5 years. The diversity, not only women, men, but really also the diversity of formation, for example, of education. So there were only forester at the beginning. Now there is much more about biology, geographer, or other formation. So the diversity really exploded in 5 years. I really have to say I see a very big change. And we have also to say that we have a restructuration. So a lot of people left the division at that time. And so it did a mix of everybody, of everything. And it was very a possibility for new forces to come with new formation or to improve the diversity, actually. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'm only working at the European Forest Institute for 4 years now. The institute is growing, or the office in Bonn has growing a lot in these 4 years. But I think there's not really an evolution. I think from the beginning, the junior researchers which have been recruited have been probably slightly an overrepresentation of women. But where I've been working before was an NGO in Flanders, the northern part of Belgium, where we seen more and more women coming in. Although of course it's a organization working with forests, but still there's a lot of communication, education, work, and so on. So it's not a typical forest job. So that can maybe explain it a bit. Maybe a comment that I have, I'm not sure if you will discuss this later, if there are any challenges to increase the balance, is that there are several countries like Germany, but also other countries where there is now really a stop on recruiting new people, and there is a lot of people retiring. This baby boomer generation, to say so, people who started to work in the 70s are now going on a retirement, but they're not really replaced. So, and there would have been a very nice opportunity to correct the gender balance, and which is sometimes now hindered because there's no young blood coming in, as Clémence also was referring to.
Thank you, Vreese. To close this first round of discussion, I would like to pose the last question. And my last question is, what gender does your boss identify with?
I have two direct bosses. And one is a man, and the second is a female person.
And how does it work?
Are they in the participants list? No. To be honest, I don't see a lot of difference. I mean, the first one is they also have a bit of different roles. So the first one is directly responsible for the project, and the second one is more working on the level of the program of the unit. So, but I don't see differences. I think not really. No.
Clémence?
So my boss is a man, but he's very supporting the minorities actually. So he comes from minorities. He's a geographer. He speaks French, and he really wants to have a diversity in the divisions. He wants to hire women, and he wants to really to have that the division reflects life. Actually, this is one of his aim. I know it's very it's her speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Yves?
Well, actually, it's quite easy. I have only men as boss, so from that point of view, I can't see any difference. But having worked quite a long time as a as a free consultant, I worked for many different women, and at the end of the day, I would say it's just different. But of no way that I would say better or worse. I mean, it's another way of dealing with things, and at the end of the day, we came to a very good quality of work. So I wouldn't say that over my lifetime, I have experienced whatever is something behind the difference that each and every person has when it comes to management.
Thank you, Adrina.
Yeah, and so my current boss, we have a new CEO at Tree Canada. She's been there for over a year, and she's a woman, and she's wonderful. And I think I would just echo what Yves just said. I think in my experience, it's just been, it's not better or worse. It's just different based on the different experiences that individuals bring to their roles, and the way you, I guess it's also your perspective and sort of the teams that you work in or manage and collaborate with. I think people just do the best they can with the tools that they have, and whether those toolkits that people acquire over their experiences are different because they are men and women and because, or other genders, the way they're treated, I think that's what may make the difference in their work and how that might be perceived by those they manage. But overall, I think my experience has just been, people are, like I said, doing the best they can with what they have, and I've had very positive experiences, and negative, I suppose, with both men and women. So, yeah.
Thank you. So I saw that there is one question from Clive Davis, but I think we will post it in the second blog. So I think it's more, could be very well posted in the second blog. So I will, it's not that I'm ignoring your question, Clive, I'm just taking it or leaving it for the next round. So if you have, so if the participants have any question, please, you can write it in the chat, and I'm reading to them, and I can post them to the panelists. So we will start with the second block, and here I would like as well to do a poll with the participants, and based on the results, I would like to discuss them with you. So now I will choose the right pool. So, exactly. So do you see it? Oh, yeah, okay. So the question is, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Women and men are treated equally in my industry. So I will wait a couple of minutes to see what the results are.
Oh, by the way, I can participate.
You can't, yeah, the co-host can't participate. You participated, yeah, because you entered and I didn't assign you as a co-host, yes. You're the lucky one. So I will end the poll because now we have 9 voters and share the results with you. So the results say that a little bit more than the half of the people disagree with this statement, so that women and men are not treated equally. And my question to the panelists is, how do the results resonate with your experience?
I think it's difficult to because the treatment are very general. I think that you can see a part of them, how it's happening with yourself, but you don't know what's happening with the other. So it's very difficult to compare. For example, if there is not the same treatment for you and for the other. My personal experience is that I think we are treated equally, actually. So I come from the States, so they are trying really to do their best to treat people equally. I hope at the state at least. But you never know, for example, of what's happening about the salary, because we rarely often hear that the women are less paid as the man. I don't know actually the salary of my colleagues, even of my job sharing colleague. I never asked him actually what is his salary. But it's also very complicated to compare because he's much more older than me and so on. He has other experience. So I think it's not so easy to answer that kind of question. And yeah.
Thank you, Clémence.
Rick,
or Yves?
Sorry, yeah. I think it's a tricky question, and of course, I was also very confused about that, and I definitely tried to figure out that if we look at what we call the framework, the frame of work, I mean these laws and things like that, I definitely believe that today we have quite a clear statement says that we have to have equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal chances, and that's at least has not to be defined again. But when we go into the real life, then even in I'm also working for a public agency. It's very often in small things that you might see differences, and even things that are not explicitly or intended. So it's a tricky thing at the end of the day to define whether it's really equal or equitable. But having discussed with a couple of my female colleagues, I really came to points where I realized that I was treating them in a different way that I would have had with my male colleagues. And I wasn't really aware about that. I wouldn't say there was bad things, but still there was. So it is really something that goes far beyond, facts and figures. It goes also about attitudes. It goes also about values, and that's another thing which takes a little bit more time, and it's also tough for women, as just Clémence said, to realize whether their choice is a self-discriminating choice or not. That's a tricky situation for everybody.
Thank you, Yves. Adrina or Rick, would you like to answer or to share your thoughts? Yeah, go on.
I don't, well, in my field, I don't see really different treatments. I mean, of course, well, I have more work in the research and NGO world, I think, where on the one hand, definitely in the NGO world, this is probably some sensitivity, which is more, well, they're more working really towards this. And in research, I think, well, the circumstances or the context are more easy to give equal rights or equal treatments. Although, yeah, I mean, maybe Jerylee, can I give one small example where you were with the subject? In 2019, we organized the conference in Köln. And I think it was you who brought your child to the conference.
Yes, I was.
For me, that was not really an issue, but then we had some very practical things, like to find a space on the bus for the excursion or things like that. And that was really the bus company was saying was not really used to this question. So, I mean, for the normal work, I think the opportunities are equal, but things like conferences, excursions, and so on. Sometimes when you are a mother, then it gets sometimes more tricky, I think. Mm-hmm. Although when I'm organizing conferences, I try to make it as family friendly, and maybe this online conferences has some advantage there. So yeah, in theory, maybe that's also what you said, Yves. In theory, there are equal rights, but in the practice and in the daily life, some things are just, contexts are making differences.
Yeah, I remember now, it was a challenge to find the seat, and they wanted, because it was a small baby, and then I decided not to go because it was too complicated to join. Yeah. Adrina.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, so I'm just thinking back because I agree with what's been said, and it's an interesting discussion. There's a lot of points running around in my head, so just bear with me. You know, over the past, as I said, sort of couple of years, I've been taking this through different discussions, and we've had conversations with women that have focused on various types of inequity and discrimination, you know, everything from marginalization and poverty and, you know, education or lack of education in some cases, lack of access and leadership opportunities, violence against women, all sorts of different things from all ends of the spectrum, again, depending on where they're from and what their experiences has been. And so that in a lot of ways was also, as I mentioned earlier, the impetus for doing a North American survey. And what we found was the short answer is yes to that question. So women did feel that they were treated differently than men in urban forestry and arboriculture. And then there's sort of a list of reasons why, which I know we're going to get into in the next block. So I'm refraining from getting into that level of detail, Jerylee. But we captured their perspectives, and we wanted to essentially quantify some of the anecdotal evidence, because what's happened in some of the conversations is their challenges that women have brought up and voiced, they often felt unheard. And because there was no quantifiable evidence to support their claims, it just kind of gets brushed under the rug, so to speak. And so we wanted to support some of these claims with some numbers, and that's what we had with this particular study. So I think you know, when I look at all the anecdotal evidence and you know, you know, internationally and cross-culturally, then yes, I would say the short answer has been yes to what I've found. I think the conversation around equality and equity is very interesting, because people often interchange those words, and they're not the same thing. And I have a little figure from a report that was just done for us that I'll share. I'll drop in the chat after this comment. But it's just I think that's something. I will try to drop this in. Hold on, let me. Can I just drop it right in here?
I give you rights to access the shares to the screen. So if you want to share it, you can share it.
Oh, let me see. Anyway, I'll put it in after. Sorry. I just wanted to say that it's really small. It's just I thought it was a really interesting, kind of very simple and nice visual to showcase the difference between what equal rights are and what equitable rights are for different groups of people. So I'll just share that in a minute. Yeah. So those are sort of my thoughts on that question.
Mm-hmm. And I have a further question that could be also nice to have, or maybe it's not applicable for everybody. So I wanted to ask, in what form did you or do you experience gender-based discrimination, if there was any example that you have close to your environment?
Actually, what I have experienced, so in this world of forester, 50 and old and more forester in Switzerland, when I come with presentation or things like this with ID, actually I have to say it's kind of positive. So it's clear they are supporting me. They are supporting me, and they want to help me. Also, I had that support in the division. They like actually to have a woman on board, and they like the exchange, and they are kind of to be very nice with me, trying to support me and trying also sometimes to avoid conflict. When they have to tell me something that they don't like what I am doing or something like this, they always try to put in nice word and things like this, not not to be too direct or something like this. So actually the discrimination that I have lived in the forestry world until now, it is something to be more supportive, or to try to put nice flower saying something like this. They are clear. They don't speak to me as if it was a male colleague where they can speak directly and tell. They usually do that less. Not all, but some of them. Mm-mm.
Thank you. Other examples?
Well, I could add once more about the colleagues that told me. I think at least we do have a very similar context with Clémence and I. And I would say what all my colleagues, female colleagues, told me, that they never really experienced a real harsh discrimination or problems or whatever. And that was very clear for them, that they could go their way and things like that. But over the discussion, what pops up once more, well, more these small things. You know, at the end of the day, when I told you we are 15 regional head directors, there's only one woman, and we have definitely far less women than men that are studying forestry. But that the ratio doesn't fit. So somewhere there are things that might play a role. Which is not an obvious one, but I would still call it, in a way or another, a passive or a kind of discrimination.
Thank you, Yves.
I don't have any example, but I'm wondering, maybe, well, we are now representing a rather high level of the forestry sector, I think. So the forest workers or so in this group. So maybe I would think maybe that the people who are more in the field and doing the chainsaw work, if you want, that they maybe will have made more examples than we have. And maybe not real problems, but more comments they get and so on.
Maybe on that's very interesting, because I did the same. You know, I didn't ask only my colleagues about the same level, but we have a couple of forest workers that are women, and they had I wouldn't say they didn't say they never had troubles, but at the end of the day, and once more, it's a very clear context that's no way to generalize it. That's just what the people told me. But they could, maybe because also they decided to go this way, they were also ready to do it, and they managed it quite well to make clear that they were there. And the overall image that I got from this, there was actually 3 women that are forest workers, was that they felt at the end of the day that it was something they never considered it as being a real problem. That's what I could translate the way they told me that.
So just Clive wrote, for example, I was once advised not to employ a younger woman as they might be expected to go on maternity leave and leave an organizational gap. Shocking but true. I am proud that I ignored this advice. So did you experience, I don't know, Adrina or Clémence, you have small kids or had small kids a while ago. So did you experience something like this while you were looking for a new position?
Well, I think, so in my personal experience, I was working with Tree Canada before I went on a maternity leave and came back to Tree Canada to a very new organization in some ways, because the leadership, the CEO had changed and a number of staff had turned over. So no, I personally didn't feel discriminated against at all with respect to maternity leave, but I do appreciate that comment, Clive. Thank you very much. And Rick, what you said earlier about family, because that does come up quite a bit, and it's actually the second. So we had 5 in our survey of over 500 women. The top 5 areas where women felt discriminated against in Canada and the US were were sort of general discrimination was one category, but and these are the smaller things that Yves, you were mentioning, and family was the second one that came up all the time, whether it's related to leaves or like Clive, as the example that you just gave, not being hired because they might go on a mat leave, and that's, I mean, certainly potential employers are not allowed to ask about that. The third was promotion bias, which came up earlier, and then pay gaps. And so these were the top, and then other was a large category. And in the other category, we had sexism and harassment, not being taken seriously by male colleagues. And Rick, again, I really appreciate your comment about, again, the different scales and levels of the types of positions that people have within these industries. Can determine the type of discrimination that they also experience. And then the third point in the other category for us was not feeling that education had been sufficient for the kinds of roles that they were doing. So there's sort of a systemic issue going on a lot of fronts here. To add another depth of layer to this conversation, what's been interesting, especially for me with these panels that we've been hosting and over the years, has been looking at just these different perspectives from different cultures and different continents, from the global north to the global south. And we don't have a representative on this panel of the global south, but looking at some of the examples that I've seen in panels where in North America, through this study and just again anecdotal evidence through our networks, the discrimination that women experience are very management focused, or again, promotion bias, or related to family. They relate to workplace policies or lack thereof to some degrees. And in other cases, women were talking about, or in our sort of international conversations, women were talking about how they were afraid to walk to work because of violence against women, or being, physically harmed in so many ways. And that impacted their family lives because a lot of their urban natural resource management work related to subsistence. And so they had children with them in some cases. So it's a very different reality. And I think that that's an important conversation that sometimes gets overlooked or is not often talked about. So I just wanted to share that as well. Yeah, I just think it's just it's such a difference in the way we see things based, again, on our experiences in the countries that we're living in. Whereas I look at our collection of panelists, and we live in very kind of, I'm grateful to live in Canada, and we live in countries where this is not a dominant narrative for us in terms of discrimination.
Yeah, I can just say that it's, so I grew up in Bolivia, so I know how it is when you're working as a woman, as a young woman, and you hear things that you don't want to hear. So it's that like this. Yeah, Andrea, you have something to say?
Yes, thank you very much for all your inputs, and Adrina, now to give a little bit more insights in your paper. When I read it, I found it very interesting also to see that women from medium range levels in job situations had more experience of or perceptions of being discriminated than women in higher positions, and so it also rang a bell to me that when economic conditions are harder, and now also in the Corona crisis we are living, we see that conditions for women are also again going down in Switzerland, that the pay discrepancy is increasing again, whereas it was improving for many years before. And also from Clémence, who said we cannot really compare easily because there is indeed, and also in our higher universities or universities of applied sciences, there is no transparency really in the pay. So it's very difficult to compare those things. We can compare numbers of women in an organization, but not really the situation they are in. and so there is still a need to demand for more transparency and more analysis. You said you wanted to put numbers on those stories you heard, and there is still a need for that. In Switzerland, we have not really data which is fresh on those matters, and I think Jerylee is starting a research which we very much need for that to know more about women in forestry. But thank you. But also looking at not only cultural differences, but also the economic situation, class situation matters as well. Also in the global south and in the north as well.
Thank you, Andrea. This brings me to the next point. So,
sorry, Jerylee, I just have one. Thank you so much, Andrea, for that comment. And on the economic piece, I saw on I guess an article recently, or one of those social media articles. It could have been anyway. You know, somebody was saying we are not, especially with the situation with COVID, we are not in the same boat. We are in the same ocean, and some people have rowboats, and some people have yachts, and some people have canoes. And so I think that applies, I think, on every level with what we're talking about when you talk about sort of the social and economic discrepancies and disparities across cultures and countries. So I just like that kind of simplified analogy that really made me think about, yeah, it's true. Kind of lets you think about other people's situations.
So maybe we can relate also this discussion with the question or the statement of Clive, who said 2020 is interesting. Is this the impact of COVID, which has impacted on women's mobility than men due to carbon responsibilities, for example? So what do you think? Clive, would you like to say it directly, or should I try to translate it by myself?
Yes, if it's okay.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It was the slide that you put up at the beginning, Jerylee, when 2020, this was the year that you got the figures mixed up, and there'd been a much stronger uptake by men than women of the course. And it did strike me from wider reading that women have been more disadvantaged by the impacts of COVID, particularly in terms of home working and the closure of, for instance, schools and nurseries for prolonged periods of time. And that has impacted upon caring responsibilities are still very much seen, even in, I would suggest, in Western societies, as predominantly female-led. And I was speculating really whether that was one of the reasons why the 2020 figures were so different. But that perhaps is a more general observation, Jerylee.
Yes, so I don't think that the students at ETH, probably it's not as the figures, it's not common that young students have families. So I would assume that it's not related to that, but maybe there are other issues. At least in the applied school where I'm working, there were some students that because of COVID, they stopped studying. Because the reason, I don't know really, but there were some issues about probably money, working, paying the whole thing, but also the situation of studying digitally. I think many people can handle that, like just being in their homes and studying with a computer. Maybe they are also a little bit depressed. You don't know. There are so many issues behind that we don't know. So these figures from the ETH, I don't think that they relate to this issue of women and family. But this was a discussion also in the Swiss context. So when I read the newspapers, there were a couple of articles relating to that and saying that through COVID, many women have fallen once more into this role of taking more care of the families. And I've noticed it also with my colleagues and my friends that it's the woman that is reducing, it's the woman that it's stressed. That yeah. But maybe we can ask that to Adrina and Clémence, what is their experience, and also Yves and Rick. At least from Rick, I know that he has also a wife, and which is also very busy with proposals. So to see how did you handle this situation, and Yves, I assume that you can also say something to that, but I don't know many things about your personal life. So we can open a little bit the floor to see how did you handle this situation? Did you go back to this wall of woman taking care of the things, or how did you handle it?
So I fully agree with Clive. Actually, it was terrible time. At least for me, as a mother, I have three kids, and they're all at school with different level, and I had to do homeschooling with the home office together. And then I was very happy to have my colleague of job sharing, because he takes care of the team, because I was no more able to take care of my kids, to take care of my team, to take care of my job. It was really too much. So it was a very terrible time. It was 6 weeks, and I really hoped in myself that it won't come again. And I was very happy that didn't close the school anymore after that. So I think it's not manageable anymore. I also had a man, my man also helped me. But of course, he was not at home all the time. He was only some days, then he was working other days. So homeschooling and home working, I would definitively say it's impossible. It's not possible. The kids, they don't understand you cannot work, and the kids cannot understand that you cannot take care of them. And it was very a terrible time, really. So I really want to thank my colleague of job sharing who really helped me and taking care of the team during that time.
Well, the first time that the schools closed, we had, well, here personally a bit of look in the sense that my partner was not that busy. Well, she was 80% working on, she's a consultant, so she was 80% working on the project, but in the end, also because lots of things were slowing down, it was quite easy for her to go to 50%. And well, my children are 6 and 8 years old, so the young, yeah, they didn't had so much homework to do, or so this was going quite smoothly. Although now we had, with Easter, we had another kind of school closure, and both myself and my partner had very upcoming we had upcoming deadlines, so it was more difficult this year with the school closure. Yeah, and I think we shared it more or less 50-50 this time. Yeah, but yeah, I also think on the other hand, particularly there was some time saved by not having to travel or not having to commute. Well, I was homeworking a lot before too, but still there was every 2, 3, 4 weeks there was some international travel involved, and this was not any longer necessary or possible. So on the other hand, there was also a bit of saving of time. I think it was not really an issue of time, but it was more this stress and burden, which was really hard.
Thank you, Rick. Adrina or Yves, would you like to share something?
Adrina, you want to start?
No, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Well, on a personal level, kids are grown up, so there was not an issue about that. What strikes me very much is that, and that comes back to what I said, even though we at least in many European countries and industrial countries, we do have a framework that at least should enable more equality. Whenever something happens, women very often comes as victims of discrimination, and it's amazing that, for example, the coronavirus just exposed women far more than men. I mean, that's something basically that's a total discrepancy between the framework and the reality, and that's a fact. And of course, the example that Adrina and Andrea were bringing about other countries and in the world, of course, that will grow and grow. But that shows that It's really something that is a long term, and we really have to make sure that we never stop working on improving things, and that's really an issue, because we could feel, oh yeah, at the end of the day it's not that bad, or compared to another country we're not that bad, but that's not the issue. It's the issue is that it has to improve wherever and as far as possible. And I was very personally shocked about the fact that we had on the news presenting the bigger impact that COVID had on women, rather than, and that was really shocking for me.
Thank you. Adrina.
I should have gone before Yves, because that would have been a nice segue to your third block, Jerylee. But
yes.
I guess on a personal note for us, I mean, we have one daughter and right now, and she's under 2. She's going to be 2 very soon, and I share Clémence's kind of, like, it was impossible to be home and work and look after a toddler. I mean, I'm not even in the homeschooling range, like it's just having a toddler run around. And so we were essentially sharing the burden. My husband and I, we were tag teaming meetings. He would have a meeting, I'd look after her, and that was just meetings throughout the day. And when she slept, that's when we did all our work. So we were pretty much working every waking minute, work between family, like childcare, and then actually trying to get some work done in correspondence with colleagues and teams and things like that. So it was very challenging. I think in general, the women feeling the brunt of what's been happening with COVID, that discussion around family care. There was another thing that I saw where women, essentially, even if you have a home office, women would essentially resort to being in the kitchen or the dining room, and their male counterpart would get the office space with the closed door. And then so you'd have to kind of field the family, like take the brunt of the family care while trying to work. And so there's a lot of, again, anecdotal kind of stories around what's been going on around the world, and how women have been marginalized in that way, and what's happened with COVID. But I mean, I think the first step, and here's maybe a segue into the third block, Jerylee, the first step is really trying to voice those challenges and talking about them, and having platforms like this where people can discuss those kinds of challenges, to start figuring out what some of the solutions can be on all fronts, both sort of industry and career specific, as well as what we're facing now with the global pandemic and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So maybe we can go to one last question in order, before we start with the last round of your statement on how to propose the next step. So I'm not sure, because there are still 3 questions here that we could pose, and maybe we can I can just ask this in order to see how you are handling in your institution. So, for example, what are the strategies being used in your institution for promoting equal treatment? If you have strategies like that. Who would like to start? Clémence.
Okay. I wanted the others, let's start also, but okay, I can start. So they are doing a lot in my industry, so in my employer to support to engage or to hire women. Actually, they're also doing things that I don't completely support. For example, we don't have quota, but it's not so far away. So, for example, when we have some when we have a recruitment and we have to hire somebody, you have to invite also women at the interview. You cannot do an interview without inviting women, even if they don't fit to the position. And to come to such extreme, I think it's not good. It's my own opinion. I think it's not a help for the woman, because the woman they don't want to be hired because they are the quota woman. But nobody wants that. Who wants that? I hope I won't be hired because I was a woman. I hope I was hired because I was fitting to the position, because they believe in my capacity. So I'm not very supporting. They are doing so many of these different kind of things, also for the other minority, for French and so on, for Italian speaking people. But I don't completely support them. So we have, when we have a recruitment, we have some rules that we have to follow, instead of with the aim of inviting more women and so on, of really having this equality. But I'm wondering myself if it is really an inequality or not, really.
Thank you, Clémence. Let's go to Yves.
Too bad. It's a tough question. First, because I don't, in my position, I don't have an overview about the human resources management. And once more, as I already said, I mean, if you put that on paper, I guess it looks good. We try to, you know, help women to make sure that there is gender equality in people, even if it doesn't work. At least there is a lot of thing which has been tried so far. But to be fairly honest, I would say that if I consider the frame of work, then basically I believe we do a little, at least too little. And looking at, for example, the strategies that were presented by Adrina, I definitely think that there are a couple of things that should have been done or should be done. For example, we don't talk about this issue. We just don't talk. Since I'm in this administration since 15 years, we never had any discussion about that ever. So actually, this webinar can raise the issue. So basically, I think that troubles me, and I don't think it's because we don't have. I wouldn't say we have a problem, but we don't need to have a problem to talk about that, because it's important. So there's all these small things that at the end of the day can make a difference to really make sure that there are no frame of work or systems that, whether implicitly or explicitly, is a break to any progress for a person being a man or a woman. So yeah, that's where I found that we definitely have improvements. But it's not easy, because they are they are much more on attitudes, on the way we are looking things. It's a more personal change, and sometimes it takes a bit longer, I guess.
Thank you, Yves. Adrina.
Thank you, Yves. Yeah, those are great comments. I think and as I mentioned in my organization, the staff is mostly women, and so I don't, and we don't have any quotas that we necessarily need to meet when staffing or hiring. It doesn't work that way. And I mean, usually in the hiring process, we hire the best person for the role, and often, perhaps because it's the nature of our organization, we are, as I said, a national NGO. We're the only national NGO that focuses on urban forestry. So whenever we do staff for something, we do get quite a bit of interest, and from both men and women, and as I said, sort of other genders as well. So I think, and we don't have any structures around who we hire based on gender. It's just, again, based on qualifications and interview, things like that. I think just going back to our research survey, it's empowering for women to feel that they're not alone. So having these conversations on different levels with multiple people with, from different places, experiences, different economic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, I think that also broadens our minds and our perspectives on different experiences. And Yves, I appreciate your comment saying, just because, someone has it worse than us doesn't undervalue the things that we necessarily experience. Absolutely. And I think that's part of the conversation. I mean, in terms of a next step, I think it's, some of the solutions are varying degrees, everything from, looking at workplace policies, looking at, better in-depth curriculum development as you go through the education systems, what people are learning, connecting to media, and just, again, this idea of empowerment for individuals and communities in these conversations. One of the things that came up quite a bit was this idea of confidence building and you know, giving women in this example the tools to feel confident to be able to speak up, because some women don't even feel comfortable sharing these challenges with their colleagues, let alone their superiors, especially if they're men. So I think it's again, it's systemic. It's looking at the challenges, and again, this is just workplace that we're kind of talking about, but it's sort of on all fronts, looking at what those challenges are and trying to find issues that address those things at the group level. You know, there's a lot of, and we're seeing so much of this here, and you are too, I imagine, in Europe, but there's a lot of initiatives that are supporting women, and this conversation around women and gender equity has just expanded so much in the last 5 years. It's incredible. In Canada, for example, we have a national project right now being led by the Canadian Institute of Forestry. It's not urban forestry, it's on the forest industry, and it's gender equity in the forest sector. And the idea is to develop a national action plan to help to kind of integrate and help with gender equity sort of on all aspects and facets of the forest sector. And so again, that's being led by the Canadian Institute of Forestry and the Center for Social Intelligence. They've just launched a Free to Grow campaign earlier this year. And you know, a lot of the resources are on there. Of course, you have the Femme for Forests initiative that was launched, I believe, in 2020, and that's you know, I think it's 10 countries and 14 partners, which is really wonderful in my perspective. There's a number of different conferences and congresses that we're seeing and events and activities. It's just, like I said, it's kind of expanded, it's exploded, if you will. There's the Women in Forests Hands that was just hosted in April. We have the Women's Forestry Congress that's coming up in 2022, but there's a number of events that are happening this year. And then there's a lot of different networks online, discussion forums, you know, through social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of these things, like Women in Wood, Women in Science, Women in Trees, Women in Arboriculture, Women in, and then fill in the blanks. And you can just find a lot of the networks that you, and the conversations that you want to have. You know, and then there's the industry training. There's industry training workshops. There's a initiative that was just brought to my attention. It's called the Her City Toolbox by the UN. And so there's just a number of different platforms and initiatives that are happening that do serve to help raise women, build that confidence, and to just offer support systems. You know, I'm just happy to share that I've started a monthly discussion series called Where Women Choose to Walk: Paths to Improving Cities and Nature with a colleague from the U.S. Forest Service. And every month we tackle a different topic that's related to these issues for women. And we have an international panel of guest speakers and presenters. And so far we deal with every topic, and we're open to ideas, of course, but everything from, you know, sort of sustainability and conservation to you know, we had a tree climber in our last episode, which focused on stewardship and storytelling. Our next episode is coming up on Wednesday, and it focuses on women and citizen science in urban natural resource management. Our March topic focused on motherhood. And a lot of these issues as they relate specifically to mothers and child rearing. And again, so I mean, it's a platform for discussion, for sharing these stories, and for offering predominantly a support system to build a community, an international community of practice to help each other and to talk about these issues and see what others are doing and potentially implement them in our own communities.
Thank you, Adrina. There was a useful, I think for the last round, you have already proposed many things on how to go forward. What are the next steps? So it was really great to hear. And someone shared also in the chat, I think it was Clive, also an Dirac project about Femme for Forest. Rick, do you want to share something? concerning EFI and their strategies for equality?
I don't think we have strategies for equality. Well, I've not hired so many people yet, but I've never been referred to these strategies. I mean, yeah, I find it important to really to hire the best person, and is it a man or a woman doesn't matter to me. I'm also a bit, well, although I've seen the comment by Renate, which is probably also very important. I'm a bit allergic to quota. I mean, I would more invest in looking for role models, and maybe that's something, Adrina, what you're doing with your long list of initiatives. I mean, I think role models is probably more important than having these strict quotas. Although I've read a comment by Renate who is saying, well, who is supportive of quotas and equality or equity plans, particularly in bigger organizations, because then it's an urge or a nudge to discuss the item, which maybe I think, yes, if you don't have this incentive to discuss the item in some organizations, it's still not really a topic. I mean, yeah, I think if you also look at the students, the distribution with students, I really think things have changed a lot, and in positions or where we are in, I think it's not really a point to have these quotas. Although, Adrina, I was a bit surprised that you said we are mainly women, but the board of directors is still mainly male. So yeah, that's also an issue I had in the NGO where I was working before coming to EFI. I think that's probably that's the next issue maybe to solve.
Thank you, Rick. It was a nice round of things that are happening, of ideas on how it could be improved. As Andrea has also co-organized with me the whole questions and the whole webinar today, I wanted to ask you, Andrea, if you have last thing that you would like to know. Otherwise, we will go to the last round, the final statement, which should be very short so that we can finish at 9.
Yeah, so I will be very fast. I like the fact, Rick, that you also pointed on role models, and in fact, also in Adrina's and Co, you have been all a team to work on this article, which was so inspiring. Is that responsibilities for family work is so crucial for determining for how women can access or not to interesting positions in their work. And I am like even the older generation. I'm even older than you are, even. and in fact, I experienced also 2 children and not very equitable divisions of work at home. Because of role models, somehow they didn't fit even our ideas, but in practice we just couldn't really change them. And happily my children are really doing much better than we did. I'm very happy to see changes, and I can see still hard times men have also sometimes in affirming their identity as fathers in their professional world. And for instance, if you are a man today who wants to take care of his children and work part-time, it's not so easy to go to his or her boss, or be it a male or female, and say I want to work only part-time because I want to take care of my children. He has also sometimes these difficulties socially to show these different choices. And I think that's also interesting. That's why we wanted to have also a discussion on gender issues, inviting men, and because in front of those family roles, the change in models is challenging for all of us, really. And it opens more opportunities to all of us, but it means also sometimes sacrifices, especially well, if there are less jobs available, there will be choices to make. If there, so it is interesting to see that it's really challenging for men and women, this situation.
Thank you, Adria. So we just have 4 minutes to go. I would like to have just a very brief statement last time that you would like to give, like one sentence on what you propose that the next step should be. Like just one sentence, please. We start with Adrina because you have always been the last one now.
Sure, my one sentence, I think I would say further discussion and visibility of these underrepresented challenges that women are facing towards better support systems.
Thank you, Adrina.
I won't make it in one sentence. Now, the point is, one thing that I wanted to stress is we have spoken about how we can help women to empower themselves and get to better situation. But I definitely believe that men have to do their share. And this is an issue also, because it's not about just getting into, is that everybody has to do his own share, that things change. And as I told you, for example, within 15 years, we never had even the idea that might be an issue to discuss with our women's colleague, whether everything was okay or not. And I think this is really important. It is really the key to this movement is not only about getting to, is really that at least men, or as a man, I can say that I feel committed to also do my share.
Thank you, Yves. Clémence.
I think I hope the next step is acting, actually. I think we have to create now a professional environment which is suitable also for women. So I mean, with that, we have to, for example, to implement infrastructure for kids, taking care of kids in the industry or inside the employer. We have to be open to job sharing, to be open to responsibility with small percentage of work, all these things. I think yet now it is very time to go on discussing, but also to create really an environment which is suitable for women in the professional life.
Thank you, Clémence. And the last word will be from Rick.
Yeah, I think I think the next frontier is probably the board organizations. We have achieved a lot, I think, but still the boards is the one of the next frontiers to get more balanced composition, I think. And that's also linking to the role model statement that I made before.
Thank you, Rick. I want to thank you all. I think there are no really questions, but there are some statements in the chat. So if you want to read them, you can just read them. I want to thank you all for this very nice discussion that we had the last 1.5 hours. I profited a lot, so I hope to present you my project in a couple of, I don't know, 1.5 years, let's say. And of course, there are some initiatives, there are projects going also in Europe. It's not that there's not going on there, but we also wanted to combine forces with people that are interested in this topic to raise this topic a little bit more predominantly, and that's why we also try to organize this webinar. If you are interested in continuing being informed or whatever, just send me an email and I will put it on the chat, and we can make you part of this group that is starting. And I wish you a good night, and thank you very much for participating and being here so late for us, but early for Adrina. So enjoy your night.
Bye.